Hello, this is Eileen, the environmental educator, and in this video, we're going to talk about if you think you're eating healthy or not, because 75% of fresh, non-organic produce grown in the United States is found to contain pesticide residue. So, Natural News calls this a toxic grocery warning. And they got a lot of their information from this EWG's Shopper Guide to Pesticide in Produce, and yeah, they just put out a report. This was March 15th. Um, the Natural News article was March 21st. And the EWG, it says their mission is simple: to empower you with breakthrough research to make informed choices and live a healthy life in a healthy environment. So that's pretty good aim. They work for you. They're not going anywhere. They say picture putting sunscreen on your skin knowing it has toxic chemicals in it. Envision biting into a carrot knowing it's tainted with pesticides. Imagine drinking from a cup of water knowing it's contaminated by pollutants from local farms and factories. This is the world we live in, but we deserve better. So they put a spotlight on outdated legislation and things that pose a risk to the health and the environment. But whether it's on Capitol Hill or communities in America, we make our voices heard. Okay, changing the debate over environmental health and putting the most important people, you and your family, at the center of the conversation. But see this right here, it says while they'll always have a mission, because what are they looking to do? Change the debate and put you at the center of the conversation. Okay, and they're gonna spotlight outdated legislation. So what? Local farms and factories and humans won't operate without the use of harmful pesticides and other things that we use every day, unless there's regulations saying that we can't. How about if we just do this voluntarily? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. And this Natural News article says unless produce is grown cleanly without pesticides and herbicides and is laboratory tested, it can be risky to consume to some degree because it might be chock full of hidden chemical poisons that are unseen to the naked eye. It says that outside of the U.S., elsewhere in the world, many of these foods are likely safer and less tainted than their American grown counterparts, even when grown conventionally, because of the lax regulations surrounding the spraying of deadly chemicals on crops. Okay, so the EWG looked at 46 different produce samples and found that 75% of freshly grown produce in the U.S. contains some degree of harmful pesticide residue, which is deeply concerning. So the Dirty Dozen list is the worst offenders, and it says that in this case, though, these conventionally grown produce are items are risky to consume because of the hidden chemicals they contain, but um, previous years have shown they are among the healthiest fruits and vegetables when grown cleanly. So, strawberries, grapes, apples, nectarines, pears, and cherries ranked at the top of the list for being the most dangerous when grown conventionally. And then the same is true for antioxidant rich blueberries and leafy green vegetables like kale, which are heavily sprayed with chemicals when grown conventionally. More than 90% of samples of strawberries, apples, cherries, spinach, nectarines, and grapes were found to have at least two different chemical pesticides on them. All in all, more than 250 different pesticides were discovered on American produce, pesticides that in many cases are illegal to use in other countries. And in many cases, the pesticides identified by the EWG on American produce are not even legal here in the US. So maybe they were legal and these things just linger around for so long, especially in the water. It's not just the soil and the air, but the water that's used. 6% of green beans contain the neurotoxin organophosphate, insecticide acephate, which was banned from use on green beans in 2011 for being a possible human carcinogen, according to the EPA. Organ phosphates are among the most common class of crop chemicals identified by EWG on American produce. Green beans and blueberries, when grown conventionally, tend to contain the highest and most worrying levels of them. So yeah, these organophosphates, they damage the nervous system and poison children's developing brains. It says here that on every kind of crop in the Dirty Dozens list, with cherries being the one exception, more than 50 different pesticides were detected. The worst offenders in terms of quantity of pesticides residues were kale, colored, and mustard greens, hot, and bell peppers. So they say strawberry, spinach, kale, colored, mustard greens, peaches, pears, nectarines, apples, grapes, bell and hot peppers, cherries, blueberries, and green beans. But then these are the cleanest 15: avocado, sweet corn, pineapple, onions, papaya, sweet peas, asparagus, honeydew melon, kiwi, cabbage, mushrooms, mangoes, sweet potatoes, watermelons, and carrots. So this EWG Shopper Guides to Pesticides in Produce says that the USDA peels or scrubs and washes produce samples before testing them, whereas the FDA only removes dirt before testing its samples. Even after these steps, the test still found traces of 251 different pesticides. Yeah, and it says that some of the USDA's tests show traces of pesticides long since banned by the Environmental Protection Agency. And so we need stricter regulations and oversight for these chemicals. How about we just stop using them? Yeah, I don't know. It says here the overall picture remains problematic. Too many pesticides are still found in high quantities on too much of the produce millions of Americans eat every day. It says here that choosing organic fruits and vegetables can almost immediately reduce the amounts of residue in a person's body because the harmful chemicals used on non-organic or conventional produce are no longer a factor. So this has the same Dirty Dozen list, and it says a total of 210 pesticides were found on Dirty Dozen items. Of those, over 50 different pesticides were detected on every type of crop on the list except cherries. And then they have the Clean 15, and they say almost 65% of the Clean 15 fruit and vegetable samples had no detectable pesticide residue. So, yeah, you do cut it out a lot when you go organic. They say that avocados and sweet corns were the cleanest produce. Less than 2% of samples showed any detectable pesticides, and just over 10% of the Clean 15 fruit and vegetable samples had residues of 2 or more pesticides. No sample from the Clean 15 items tested positive for more than 3 pesticides. So if that makes you feel better, you're cutting down your pesticides by, maybe up to 35%, but I mean, up by 65%, you still have, 35% that are still testing out there. But I guess you're giving yourself a better chance. But um, there is this. The USDA also does not test for produce for all pesticides used in crop production. For example, glyphosate is the most heavily used pesticide in the U.S., and it can be found in high levels on several grains and beans, such as oats and chickpeas. But the USDA has not analyzed these crops for glyphosate. So, okay. I guess you can't find what you're not looking for. Right here it says that clinical trials continue to show that people who switch from conventionally grown to organic food see a rapid and dramatic reduction in their urinary pesticide concentrations, a marker of pesticide exposure. So they're in your body. All of these things that, we think nothing of using, all of the chemicals, all of the toxins, they get into you. And this group, they blame U.S. pesticide regulations are inadequate. Well, maybe what's actually inadequate is that we're using these. So that's really it. I don't know. Maybe we should learn how to take care of pests without these and do some natural farming. It's got to be feasible. You know, people, how many campaigns every year? How many decades are we going to stop cancer? And, the funds that go into it and the donations that go into it. And, everybody's wearing bows for cancer. Well, this is how we're getting it, at least in part. We it's caring about the environment has a lot more to do with just if global warming's real or not. Okay? So right here, people, eat up, I guess. So stay tuned, people.